Yeah, let me throw this in the trash. That was really good, but I'm not going to chew it. Pull this out of here. Okay. Well, we're ready to start this morning with our continuing study of Chronicles, First Chronicles 26, and Judy's going to read, but not before I have kind of brushed over some of the lists and administrative details, um, and then I will turn it over to her. Probably somewhere around chapter 20. We might make it through 27 today, but we get back into more chronology and more actual details as we get to chapter 28. So, are you talking about 26? Yeah, I will, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time in them. As I've indicated, there'll be some key passages that I want to bring our attention to, and then we'll go from there. But let's do what we do what we should do before we conduct any kind of a study such as this, is to go to our Heavenly Father in prayer, and there are more than one reason why we do that. So let's go to God in prayer now at this time. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this day, this Lord's Day. We thank you for the opportunity to come together with brothers and sisters of like precious faith. We note that we do our studies in the morning, and we're very grateful for those who are able to join us and help us and make our study more rich through their participation. We're thankful for those who are able to join us online. We note that there are reasons why many of those might not make it in here in the morning, but also there are those who join us over who listen and follow on from a distance, and we're grateful for those who are willing to take the time and in many cases even deal with time zone differences to come back and join us on a regular basis. We're very grateful for that. We thank you for the fellowship that we gain and the encouragement that we gain from those who give us that support. We ask that the study be scripturally sound and that it be pleasing in your sight. We note that it would do us no good were that not the case. And so we thank you for your gospel. We thank you for your word, and we thank you for the way that it harmonizes and reinforces our studies and gives us the confidence that it is truly your work and your protective and providential care working in us. We ask that you be with those who are traveling today and keep them safe. We note that there are a number who are on the road, and we thank you for their protections, and we look forward to their return. We ask that you be with those who are home today, who are recovering from illnesses or from surgical procedures. We ask that you be with those who are suffering from allergies and things of that nature during this season. We're thankful for the rains that we've had the last few days, and thankful that it hasn't brought us any seriously inclement weather. But we certainly are grateful for the added moisture. Grateful for for the way that you protect your creation. We ask that you be with Fran as she continues to recover in health. We note that Sandra is dealing with some vertigo issues, and we ask for a rapid resolution of that. We note that there are many who are suffering from illnesses, and more than we can cover, and we note that you know all this before we do and better than we do, and we thank you for that. We ask that you be with our first responders and our military personnel wherever they are. We ask for a peaceful resolution to many of the crises that are occurring around the world, and also domestically here too, Father. We note that this world is under your hand and under your control, and we submit to that control. We note that regardless of what happens here, that you are ultimately in charge, and we would be remiss if we did not consider that over and over again. We thank you so much for the love that you have for us, and for the protections that springs from that. We ask that you continue to guide us in every way, keep us safe, keep us on the right path. We offer this prayer in the name of your precious Son. Amen. So we are, of course, we've noted, and I have noted that there's a very tedious list here, and if there's one over that we've covered a number of backgrounds and a number of genealogies, but also a number of detailed assignments. We noted that chapter 24 was the divisions of the priest. Chapter 23 was the duties of the Levites. Chapter 25 is how David arranged for the music. And then chapter 26 is where we will take up today is how he arranged for the porters. Now I mentioned that the porters are not those who had typically, when you think of a porter, you think of someone who lifts something up and totes it and carries it. But these porters are actually doormen, door guards. As you will see, there's a military nature to that, and some of these passages will point that out to us. So we're going to be dealing with the porters, and we're going to be dealing with the treasury. Now, as we deal with the treasury, we want to note that David has accumulated a great deal of material, or is in the process of accumulating a great deal of material, which he has charged or will charge Solomon with. He has charged him privately already, but he will publicly charge him down the road, and with the assembly of all that. And we note that all of these construction things, we're told, went on outside, literally outside of the walls, so that there was no sound of construction equipment or anything that reached the Temple Mount itself, at least in theory. So when it went together in a very quiet, reverent fashion, and of course that mimics the construction or the assembly process of the tabernacle of the Lord, of the children the children of Israel in the desert as they or in the wilderness as they wandered, actually moved in accordance with the Lord's commands. So we see that detail is continued here, the administrative detail and the records that are being kept and reconstructed carefully reconstructed as Ezra has put together these chronicles in accordance with what has been known of 2 Samuel. And I note here in passing that we'll see that David is also, we will find that David will, as he charges Solomon, quote a few of the passages from other parts of the Bible, in particular Deuteronomy in one place. And we note that there are two reasons, two ways this would happen. One is through divine inspiration, and the other is because, remember, that as kings, as part of their charge, they are charged with copying the books of the Old Testament, supervising and overlooking and proofing and doing that themselves. In other words, God says to be the king, you must learn my word. And so we note that David is able to go back and recall, and then of course with the help of his scribes and with the help of his priests, he's able to go back and pinpoint these things. And so he's probably not necessarily speaking from a point of divine inspiration, but has basically a prepared presentation for those that he will be reading to. But first off, we get to the assignment of the door for the doors. Remember that the temple had multiple doors facing in multiple directions that were there to provide for different functions. One of them was actually overlooked the Valley of Hinnom, which is where they burned their garbage. And so whenever they were done with all the refuse from the sacrifices, they would take it out that gate and they would dispose of it. And of course, that from that valley, that imagery there is what we get when we look at the descriptions of, for instance, Gehenna is actually an offshoot of that. We look at that imagery of basically a boneyard, a trash dump that is being burned. Okay, and that's where a lot of that imagery comes from. So now we talk about this, and I'm going to go ahead and start reading. And I don't know how far I got in here. Okay, I'm going all the way to verse 13, but before I get there, I'm going to note verse 4 talks about the sons of Obed-Edom. Okay, and it opens with the sons of Obed-Edom: Shemaiah the firstborn, Jehozabad the second, Joah the third, Sakar the fourth, and Nathaniel the fifth. Amiel the sixth, Issachar the seventh, Peulthe. I see. I don't have any. I have trouble with that too. The eighth, and then we see that God blessed him, and so he's talking about blessed him with the number of men who could serve as priests from his family. Okay, and so we note that also Obed Edom is where the ark was rested for some period of time, and and God is rewarding Obed Edom and blessing Obed Edom for the reverent way that he has preserved and taken care of the ark until such time as it could be moved into the house of God. All right. So then we note another thing that we want to note here, and of course remember that these are men who are in charge of keeping the doors. Okay. Uh, we talk about Shemaiah and his sons, and we talk about all the sons of Obed Edom and their brethren, and we look at verse 6, verse 7, and verse 8, and we note that we have closing phrases like "for they were mighty men of valor," for they were strong men, okay, whose brethren were strong men, Elihu and Semachiah, and then able men for strength for the service. And then we look at numbers. But the point that we're drawing here is that we look at their jobs as that and the requirements that they be of the porters. And we note that there's a military requirement, a strength requirement, an ability, a defensive ability requirement. Why is that going to be? Well, the treasury is going to be inside those temple walls, and their job is going to be to protect that treasury until such time as that temple has been constructed. Okay, so they are drawing, and remember that you know how when you if you join the what is it, the game warden service or the state troopers, you don't very typically for your primary assignment get assigned to your home. Why is that? Because you have familial and familiar associations which are required, which can be taken advantage of by your friends, and so they'll typically assign you somewhere else rather than your hometown for your place of duty. And game wardens is particularly like that, and that is that you very seldom end up where your home of record is. All right, and so and that's because of the possibility for corruption. All right. Now, in this particular case, we note that it is that they are selected by random. Okay, they're selected by lot. They draw lots to decide which doors they're going to be assigned. All right, and so we're going to note that, and we talk about, and we get to verse 12 and 13, and I read that among these were the divisions of the porters, even among the chief men, having wards one against the other, to minister in the house of the Lord. And they cast lots, as well the small as the great, according to the house of their fathers for every gate. They were chosen at random for assignments to each particular gate. Now that assignment didn't float around. They weren't going to do one gate this course and then another gate the next course. They were assigned there permanently, so they knew where they were supposed to go. Okay, all right. So as we continue on, we note that the lot fell eastward to Shelmiah, and when we're talking about that, the doors of the east, and of course we note that the temple faced the east, and the main gate was to the east. Okay, to Obed-Edom southward, and to his sons the house of Asupim, and then of course Shupim and Hosah west with the gate of Shalaketh. I don't know if I've got that gate. I probably should have highlighted that last with the gate Shalaketh. That is the gate that in all probability opened out over. It's more than likely the gate out of which they carried all of the refuse and what they call the offal. from the sacrifices of the temple. Okay, and so by the causeway of the going up, ward against ward. All right, now we get to the arrangement, and there's a summary there. When we get to eastward, 17, eastward were 6 Levites. Let me see if I've got that. Eastward were 6 Levites, northward 4 a day, southward 4 a day, and toward Asupim 2 and 2. At Parbar westward, 4 at the causeway, and 2 at Parbar. These are the divisions of the porters among the sons of Korah and among the sons of Merari. Now, I want you to consider this. I want you to think about this. First off, we know that the main gate, the larger gate, is guarded by, okay? 6 men, okay? And by 4, and southward by 4, and on the toward Asupim 2 and 2, and westward 4 at the causeway and 2 at Parbar. We note of import that the main gate had more men. All right. Now you think, well, how are these men going to guard it day by day? But we also note that as we have looked earlier, that there were large numbers of these men, and down the road here as well. We're not talking about here. I won't do that, but we're talking about, in this case, a few dozen. All right. There were thousands. We talk about the captains and those who were assigned, captains over hundreds and captains over thousands. They had military divisions to these men whose job it was to guard. And there were large numbers. They had that many on watch and probably relieved each other every 4 to 6 hours all through the night, all day long and all night long. So it took a lot of men to stand those watches. And also, what happens if there's a problem, if there's an incursion? Men have to be standing by on the ready to respond. Some can have a rapid response team in the event of an incursion, of a problem. They have to be able to assemble. So there are those who are standing the watch, and there are those who are on call to come and respond. So it takes a large force, and David provided for a large force to do that. He and his administrators, were large, were many in number. Treasures, the arrangements of the treasures. When we get we see the Levites, Ahijah, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time over this, but Ahijah was over the treasures of the house of God and over the treasures of the dedication. The treasures of the house of God are those accoutrements that were used in the tabernacle, okay? And those things dedicated were those things that were taken as spoils in campaigns and dedicated to, converted into the materials, to buy the materials and to preserve, to provide the wealth that they needed to build and continue to maintain and support the temple and the work of the temple itself. Okay, and so they have had not only a store of accoutrements, they had a treasury of sizable portion, and David made sure that there was plenty there, at least in the latter years of his life. Okay, and so we talk about. Well, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the sons of Laden. And the sons of Jehaleel in verse 23, and the Amramites, and the son of Gershom, the son of Moses, was ruler of the treasures. That's probably an important thing to remember, although I probably didn't write that down. His brethren by Eleazar, Rehobiah, and Sikri. Now we're already to verse 26, and Shelemeth and his brethren were over all the treasures. Things. So that's not, so now they have a division of that. They have one man who controls all of the treasury, including the accoutrements, but then the responsibilities are broken down, and assignment is made for taking care of the treasures of the house itself, and then the dedicated treasures, the treasury aside from the artifacts, were somebody else's responsibility. And I that it says David the king, the chief fathers, the captains over thousands, and captains of the host had dedicated. Okay, so now we're talking about the reference to the size of the force that's required, that is reserved to protect this, what the threshold, which is going to become the holy mount. All right. And then out of the spoils won in battles did they dedicate to maintain the house of the Lord. Okay. So again, it's that custom of tithing the spoils of your victory and setting aside part of it as the Lord's. Okay. Abraham and the king of Salem, remember? All right. And then we note that Samuel the seer, and Saul the son of Kish, Abner the son of Ner, and Joab the son of Zeruiah had dedicated, and whosoever had dedicated anything was under the hand of Shelomith and his brethren. And so we note that those are the priests caste who received these tithes in the name of the Lord, and literally they sanctify them, they set them aside. Okay, and then we talked about. Let me see if I go to verse 30. We'll jump to verse 30, talking about the Hebronites and his brethren and men of valor. And now we start to look at numbers of men who were involved. 1,700, 1,700 of them were officers among them of Israel on this westward, and all the business of the Lord and in the service of these were administrators and military officers, and under them were vast numbers of people who were maintaining order, maintaining protection, and they're basically the constabulary force and the administrative force, if you will, for everything on the east side of Jordan. Okay, and then we get down to and there's a one. I'll read it. Among the Hebronites was Jared even among the Hebronites, according to the generations of his father. We look at this passage where it says, in the 40th year of the reign of David, they were sought for, and they were found among them mighty men of valor of Jazer of Gilead. Now remember, Gilead is over on the Transjordan area. It's on the other side of the Jordan, east of the Jordan, if you will. Okay. And so we note that this is the 40th year that David, we get a period of time that is doing this, the 40th year of the reign of David they were sought for. Now, how long did David reign? David reigned, according to Scripture, for 40 years. So these are details that he's undertaking in the last year of his, not his life, but the last year of his active reign before he turns the reins of service over to Solomon. Okay, so he's taking care of details, he's manning things up, and he's obviously been thinking about this for some time. But now we see that he is putting things in motion so that he can turn a functional machine for the construction of the temple and the administration of the kingdom, so that he can turn over a functional kingdom to his son Solomon when that time comes. He doesn't want to leave it in a shambles. He's done a pretty good job of organizing things. Okay, so then we note that his brethren, men of valor, were 2,700. Made rulers over the Reubenites, the Gadites, the Had tribe of Manasseh, and for every manner pertaining to God and to the affairs of king. It was in a religiously based administration which was being established here. Okay, which is pretty smart, and also very a very admirable thing to do, that he perceives to be what God would want in him. Okay. So it gets us to the military and civil officials, and I really don't want to spend a lot of time going over the names and everything, but we talk about starting in 27, verse 1, the children of Israel, their number, to wit, the chief fathers and captains of thousands of hundreds and officers who served the king in any manner of the courses which came in and went out month by month throughout the months of the year. Of every course were 24,000. Every course, month to month, year to year. Now we note that those courses In one place, we see that there were 24 priesthood, but we also note that these are outside of the priesthood. We're talking about a monthly assignment, so that whenever the watch changed, 24,000, there will be a turnover of 24,000 men who were moved. They lived elsewhere, came here, did their service, went back home. 1 month out of the year they had to serve, and then they would spend the rest of the time with their families. Okay, that's a pretty cool rotation. I wish I'd had that kind of rotation in the Navy, because usually I was home for 2 months out of the year and gone for 10. All right, but we see that that's how that happens. Okay, so throughout all the months of the year, every course were 20 and 4,000. Now, I'm not that great at mathematics, but 12 times 12 is 144. So twice that is 288. That's nearly 300,000 men that were involved in basically the military protection and the administration of the country. So there was nothing haphazard about it. All right. And quite frankly, Israel has pretty much been a military-based society, was then, and it is today a largely military-based society. Okay, so and that probably is neither here nor there. We note that the Zionist nation is not much protection at this point. Okay, so. As we continue on, we look at we look at all the first courses, and all I really want you to do is note that there's 24,000 in that course, and as we continue on through each of these chapters, verses, right on through verse 22. Okay, we note that there are 24,000 per course. Okay, so now we look at that, and we note as we get to verse 23, that David, get to verses 23 and 20. David took not the number of them from 20 years old and none, and said he would increase Israel like the stars of the heavens. And then we see that Joab, the son of Zeruiah. Now we go back. We go back and remember we talked about the numbering of the men for war, and Joab refused to number the Levites because the Levites wasn't supposed to be their job. And we note that Joab began to number but finished not, because remember that the wrath of God, diseases, that the plague fell them as a result of the fact that David did something God told him not to do. Okay, and so there was wrath fell for it against Israel. Neither was the number put in the account of the Chronicles of King David. So Ezra's saying, I left those people out whenever I numbered them in terms of the army. And then we talk about the king's. Over the king's treasures was the son of Adiel, and the storehouses in the fields and in the cities and the villages. They were planning ahead. Would have whenever they would bring in harvest their crops, they would distribute as needed, but then they would put them in the storehouses. David was setting up storehouses. These storehouses were for the support of the people, the army, and the military structure and the administrative structure of those people whose job it was. These were David's storehouses for his administration that we're talking about here, okay? And those who were assigned there to we go to verse 27, I think. See if I can get there. 26 through 28. Over them that did the work of the field, for the tillage of the ground. So here's a man who controls the workforce. David not only had storehouses, he had people whose job it was to till the fields and to gather the crops, all right, and to bring them into the storehouses. And he had vineyards, and he put Shimei the Ramathite over the increase of the vineyards for the wine, the Shipmite. And over the olive trees and the sycamore trees, and you see I've highlighted the sycamore trees that were in the low plains was Balhanan the Gederite, and over the cedars of oil was Joash, sellers of oil. So they had oil sellers. So they harvested oil from the olive oil, which was used for additional purposes, standard household use, but also olive oil was what they filled their lamps with, so that they could have light at night. So olive oil was important in that regard. But I note the sycamore tree, which is also in another place called the sycamine trees that were in the low plains. Remember that one of the armor of sycamine trees. And what is a sycamine tree? Okay. It's a fig tree. Fig trees that are cultivated in the higher grounds where they can take care of them. But then you get into the lower land, the rougher area. The sycamine tree was a more coarse type of a fig, and it required more tending to it to get the fig to actually to properly get mature. They had to physically figs, to bruise them so that they would then ripen, so that they could be harvested and used. Otherwise, they were like trying to eat a raw persimmon. Okay. All right. So we've talked about the harvest. We also note that herds were in the valleys. There were herds of camels. And it's interesting to note that an Ishmaelite was placed over the camels, probably an Ishmaelite who had been converted to Judaism, okay, who was in charge of the camel herds. Well, the camels were used for carrying things, right? And then move things around, move equipment around, okay, for one. And we look at the asses, and we note that, remember that we noted that asses were used for milk, as a source of milk, much as a cow would, okay? And of course, they had their sheep. Have cows that were, thing about asses, where they were more resistant to harsh weather, sparse territory, and they could be sequestered and fed, brought silage brought to them. Now we do that in a lot of cases. That's one of the ways our cattle herds during the winter here, and we also have them where we'll stall them up and fatten them up. But of course, they had to be moved out over the plains. The sheep and the cows had to be constantly moved so that they would have fresh pasture on which to graze. And that was a huge responsibility. But these men all worked for David. All right, all worked for the king. And over the flocks, the Hagarite. And these things, and these were the rulers of the substance, which was King David. So we wait to the very end of it, and David owned all of this. Okay? All right. So he had control of it. And then we look at David's uncle, who was a counselor. Jehiel, the son of Hachmoni, was the king's sons. And we note Ahithophel was the king's counselor, and Hushai the Archite was the king's companion. Those names are going to become prominent. Certainly, they were prominent in Samuel, as we talked about the conspiracy to unseat Solomon as the king. We note that these men were involved in that, and we also note that Ahithophel is one who counseled for a military campaign that was ill-fated, as it were, and we'll talk about that hopefully as well. So as we get to this, we are, where am I? Here we go. Ahithophel and Abiathar and the general. Now, this is probably not a bad for the morning, because in verse 28, chapter 28, we're looking at the actual assembly of the people and the military officials and all of the administrators of the kingdom in one place where David is assembling them. And he's going to be telling them about his plans, God's plan, okay, to build the temple and to administer and maintain the temple and the worship. All right. So he's going to be charging them. First, he's going to charge the people, and he's going to tell them the same thing that he told Solomon. And then he's going to turn around and he's going to charge Solomon, but he's going to do that in the presence of, he's going to do that in a public way, in the presence of all of his administrators there. So they understand that the orders that he gives to Solomon are the orders that he gives to them as well. And their responsibility is to carry out those orders of Solomon, not only as the administrator before he is installed as the king, but as the overseer of the construction project, which will be taking place even before David is no longer on the scene, so to speak. Okay, so we'll start in chapter 28, verse 1 next Sunday morning. Are there any questions or comments at this time? And I kind of have to apologize for the tedious nature of these lists and of these assignments. But the point that we want to note, overarching in all of this, I told you that to tell you this, is what we're saying, is that there was not much left. There was no stone left unturned as far as the plans for doing all this. Okay, the plans were very detailed, and that Ezra, indeed, and the scribes during the days of Samuel were also detailed in the way that they recorded all this. And there's a reason for that. In God's worship, in the administration of God's divine kingdom, details matter. Okay? And if you can get one thing out of the chapters that we have just covered, it is just exactly that. Details matter. And when we apply God's word to our lives and to our worship, likewise, details matter. Okay, thanks for your attention, and we'll be back at the top of the hour for our service.